Story time about how I stole a famous celebrity's boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Growing up, I loved the fashion industry and loved clothes. I knew I wanted to make that my job in the future. And just to let you guys know, I'm not the prettiest girl. I'm not anything special in terms of looks, but I'm pretty funny and I have a really great personality. When I was 16, I moved to New York to become a fashion stylist, and I quickly started gaining traction. I became an intern at a really big fashion house, and this helped me a lot. As you can imagine, I started meeting a lot of celebrities and just really important people doing this. Although I never really got to style anybody, I was still in the room when they were there for fittings and different things. After a few years, I quit that internship and went into another company. This new company, I was getting paid more and I was just happier in general, and I was able to style a bunch of people on my own. I wasn't styling any celebrities or anything like that, but just basically people that worked in the industry and people that had different events to attend. But one day this celebrity comes in, and no, he's not an A-list or anything, but he's pretty famous. He came in with his girlfriend, who at the time was also famous. I basically had to style both of them for an event, and it was really fun. But here's the thing. Clearly, he thought I was really funny, and we were making jokes back and forth. The fitting took longer than usual because we had some pieces coming in, so we had to wait for them to come in for them to try it on. But she was clearly annoyed. Obviously, waiting around for clothes is not the most fun thing, but at the same time, we were giving them champagne, we ordered them amazing food, and she was literally getting her tushy kissed. I could tell that he was really embarrassed by her behavior. At one point, he even told her just to sit down and relax, which she did eventually. I left them alone for a few minutes before the clothes arrived. Once they arrived, I came in and I gave him the pieces. She literally ripped the dress out of my hand and went into the changing room. He looked at me and apologized and said, you know, she's just in a bad mood today. And I said, I totally understand. This was my job, so I knew I couldn't react any other way, but I wanted to slap her across the face. While she was changing, he started making small talk with me. I made a few jokes and it actually made him laugh, which I was really surprised. And then he even complimented me about what I was wearing. I mean, I did look really good. Once she came out of the dressing room, she started complaining right away about the fit. It didn't surprise me whatsoever, but at the same time, I just really couldn't believe how she was acting. Then I realized that she was probably jealous because he was talking to me. He was like going out of his way to talk to me. They finally left and he said bye. But 2 days later, he comes back by himself. He wanted me to style him for an event coming up that weekend. And that's when I realized I needed to take advantage of the situation. I had the feeling he liked me, but I wasn't going to come out and say it. So I turned up the charm 1000%. We talked for about 2 hours. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I stole a famous celebrity's boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I knew I had to make my move now or it would be never. The fact that he came in 2 days later and by himself, that let me know that he liked me. Like I said in part 1, he was there for a few hours. We totally hit it off. We even talked about each other's families and what our favorite foods were. So that's when I asked him if he wanted to have a quick dinner. Trust me, I was so nervous to ask him, but I knew I had to do it. And he said yes. We finally got to the restaurant and sat all the way in the back. I kind of got the feeling that he didn't want anyone to see us, but it made sense. That's when I asked about his famous girlfriend. Then he quickly apologized for her behavior and told me that she's never really like that, and I told him that I'm used to being treated that way by celebrities. He said that I didn't deserve that kind of behavior from her. That's when I asked him if he was happy with her. I could tell the question caught him off guard because he didn't really know how to respond, and that's when he told me that he was happy with her, but he didn't know if the relationship would actually go anywhere. We proceeded to have a few drinks, and I could tell this was really loosening us up. Out of nowhere, I grabbed his hand and kind of massaged it, but he didn't pull it away. That just confirmed the fact that he liked me. Then he asked me for my phone number. We said goodnight and went our separate ways. But for the next week, he texted me every single day saying good morning. Of course, we would text pretty much all day long. I finally decided to tell him how I felt, which he obviously already knew, and he told me that he felt the same. Then he was the one that asked me out, and we actually went to the beach. We were at the beach for about 6 hours and we had such a great time. At the end of the beach day, I kissed him and asked him if he really wanted to be with his girlfriend. He stayed quiet and didn't answer, but the following day he messaged me and told me that he broke up with her. Here's the bad news. We only dated for 3 weeks. On the 3rd week, he actually broke up with me and told me he was dating someone else. I saw it coming. He's now dating another celebrity. Their relationship isn't public yet, but I have a feeling they're gonna announce it soon. I keep texting him and asking him to take me back. I was actually falling in love with him. What should I do, you guys? Story time about how I'm still in love with my toxic ex. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is really complicated, but please hear me out before you start judging me in the comments. Ex and I dated for exactly 1 year. When we first met, he was super charming, cute. I mean, he was like the perfect boyfriend. My family loved him, but gradually he started changing. The more serious we got about the relationship, the worse he became. For example, at the beginning of our relationship, we always used to hang out with our friends, and sometimes I would hang out with my own friends on my own. But 2 months into the relationship, he he began guilting me. He would tell me that I would rather hang out with my friends, which wasn't even true, and then I would end up staying home and then he would go out with his friends. He would also tell my parents sometimes that I needed to be taught lessons, like how to respect men and stuff. My parents detested him. One time he came over for Thanksgiving and basically told me that I needed to go change my clothes. He even said that I looked like a whore in front of my cousin. After that, my cousin really hated him and began doing her own research. She found that he was liking girls' pictures on Instagram and that he was leaving dirty comments on their pictures. Once she found all this information, she told me and I confronted him. He told me that he had every right to comment on anyone's pictures because it was just the internet and it wasn't real life. I kind of had to accept what he said because I didn't want any more problems. I asked my cousin to stop searching stuff, but she just didn't let up. Almost every single week, she would send me screenshots of things that he'd comment on girls' pictures. Finally, I told my boyfriend that my cousin had found all this out, and he basically forced me to cut her out of my life. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I stay with him? But when things were good, they were really good. He was super loving, affectionate. He always wanted to be with me, and he always prioritized going on dates and having fun. He would always surprise me with fun things. One time he planned this beautiful picnic, and we even stayed in the park and spent the night there. But then he would manage to ruin everything by becoming really jealous and controlling. My dream job was to work in marketing, and I just happened to land this internship at a really popular fashion magazine. When I told him I got the job, he acted really strange. He didn't even congratulate me. A few hours later, he told me that I was trying too hard and that he didn't want a girlfriend that was going to be at work all the time. He also asked me how much I was going to be getting paid because he wanted to make sure it was less than what he earned. So in other words, he was jealous and envious at the same time. Then he insisted that I work around his schedule, so I could only work the days that he was working. Then he told me that if I wasn't spending enough time with him because of my new job, he would break up with me. I took that as the last straw. It was my dream job, but he was making everything terrible. While my entire family was so happy for me, I was crying in bed at night. The next morning, I woke up and texted him and told him that I didn't want to see him. He ran straight to my house. We got in his car to talk, and I proceeded to tell him everything I thought. Then he turned it all around and told me that I wasn't the girl that he fell in love with, and that if I didn't change, he would break up with me. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm still in love with my extremely toxic ex. After I told him that I needed him to change, he basically turned everything around and told me that I wasn't the girl that he fell in love with anymore, and that I was the one that needed to change if I wanted to continue in the relationship. And to top it all off, he kicked me out of his car. We didn't speak for about 2 weeks. During that time, I started at my dream job and everything was actually going pretty well. I didn't have the pressure on top of me about him not wanting me to work, and my life was actually getting better. My skin started clearing up and I even started losing weight. In other words, I was really happy. My parents and family were so happy too. But then I see that he starts posting other girls on his Instagram. I knew that he was doing it on purpose, so I tried not to get upset, but I just couldn't help it. Then I made a huge mistake. I messaged him and asked him if he still loved me. Then he called me and we talked on the phone for about 4 hours. By the end of the phone call, we were back together. And guess what? We even agreed to moving in together. I made him promise that he wouldn't be jealous anymore and that he would stop trying to control everything I did. He promised up and down that he would never be that way again. But literally 3 days later, he comes over super drunk, demanding you know what. I said no because my parents were home and I wasn't going to do that in the house with them. Then of course he starts threatening me again, saying that if I don't do it, I don't love him and blah blah blah. So I took advantage and I kicked him out of the house. Then he sent me an essay of a text message breaking up with me and telling me how he doesn't love me anymore. It's been 2 months since that happened. Once again, I'm doing great at work. My family and I are super happy, but I actually miss him. Not only do I miss him, I'm so jealous all the time because I see he's posting girls on his Instagram. I miss being with him and I miss having fun with him, but I don't miss always feeling scared and nervous. I even tried dating a few guys, but nobody compares to him. A few weeks ago, I went on a date with this really nice guy. We connected and went on a few more dates. I posted on my story that I was on a date and my ex went crazy. He actually showed up at the restaurant and told me to come out and talk to him. And I did. I literally left the guy that I was on a date with to go speak to my ex. He told me to leave with him and I said no. He grabbed my purse and threw it on the ground and told me that he would never speak to me again. 3 days later, he was back in my messages begging to see me. But the guy that I was on a date with actually really likes me and asked me to be his girlfriend. I don't know what to do. I love my ex and I want to get back with him, but I know he's crazy. But this new guy is really nice and really caring. What do I do?
Am I the a-hole for not going by my dad's because he always sides with his girlfriend and her daughter? My parents split custody. It's pretty random. Some days I'm home and sometimes I'm by my dad. I'm 15 female. Dad started dating Jane a while ago, maybe a year. She has a daughter, Mandy, that's 12 or 13, I think. Then they started spending a lot of time at my dad's. They have their own apartment, but they're still always by him. The first time they stayed over when I was there and somehow Mandy ended up in my bed. Her mom has this cot/bed thing she brought to my dad's for her. But somehow I woke up in the middle of the night and she was in my bed. I kicked her out. Then my dad and Jane said that was mean, and I have a fool anyway, so I should share. There's other stuff. I have a chair in my dad's living room I got as a gift. It's comfy, and when I move out, it'll go with me. Well, Mandy always wants to race for the chair. Even when I win the race, my dad makes me let her sit in it because they're guests. So I ended up sitting on the floor because my dad has a recliner, and Jane lays across the couch. So I stay in my room instead. My dad's tried getting me to come out there by then, but why would I have to sit on the floor like a dog? He keeps saying I'm being a difficult teenager, but that's not it though. One time my mom and I went and did some stuff before she dropped me off. She had bought me a blanket that had my favorite team's logo on it. I was excited to sleep with it. Stupid, I know. So she let me take it to my dad's. My dad made me share it with Mandy because it wasn't fair that I got something and Mandy didn't. It's not just the blanket it's happened with. It's anything that I have to share. But if Mandy has something I'd like to use, it tells me it's hers, that if she doesn't want to let me, she doesn't have to. One time Mandy was reading one of my books, and Jane and my dad started fighting. Jane wanted to leave, so Mandy wanted to take my book. But I said no, so she wouldn't leave. My dad yelled at me to just let her have it. They made up, so I got it back, but if they didn't, I would have lost one of my favorite books. My dad and I had plans to go ice fishing. Just him and I, something we've done since I was 7. Well, he brought Jane and Mandy along. All they did was complain. It's too cold. Fish are gross. This is boring. So we left early, and he just said, sometimes you have to compromise. When I got home, I was mad. My mom was annoyed and called him, and they argued. And he talked to me and repeated his compromising BS. I was supposed to go back to him a few days later, but I decided I didn't want to. I never even spent time with just him anymore anyway, so what's the point in going there? I told my mom, she said it was my choice. So I told him, and he said, I'm just used to being an only child and I can't be spoiled my whole life, and that I can't run away whenever there's a problem. Well, since then, his family is trying to get me to go back too. Am I the a-hole for not visiting my dad anymore? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. Your dad is failing you as a parent. Go back, with your mom waiting, and pack up everything important item you have at your dad's so that Mandy can't get her grubby little hands on your stuff. That's what my mom wants to do too. Right now, he's holding my Switch and saying I'll only get it back when I come over to talk things out. He didn't buy it either. I did. Your father is displaying absolutely disgusting behavior. I am so sorry for you. You shouldn't have to deal with this. Would you be open to going over to talk? To make it seem like you're cooperating so you can get your stuff back. Like, go over, talk, get the Switch back, and suddenly pack any other important item that he could hold over you. Then get your mom to pick you up. Huh, no. I'm sure he'd include Jane and Mandy in that talk. Similar stuff has happened before this. He blames me because my cousins don't like Mandy because I don't like her, so they won't either. He has had talks with me before with them literally right there. I can't tell him that I don't want them around when they are right there, as that's kind of rude. If I were you, I'd insist that if they're present, your mom is too. You need a grown advocate who will call out adults on their BS, so that your perspective isn't trampled over as just being a difficult teen. I like this idea. Thanks. Not the a-hole at all. Your dad is prioritizing his new girlfriend and her daughter over your needs and wants. Mandy wants something, she gets it. Your chair, Mandy gets it. Your book, Mandy gets it. Your new blanket, Mandy gets it. Your dad and Jane enable the behavior, and your dad's choices have shown you he doesn't prioritize your relationship with him. I wouldn't want to go somewhere where I am made to feel like a second-class citizen. When your dad asks why you don't want to go over anymore, send him exactly what you have written here. I'm so glad your mom supports you and stands up for you. Best of luck, OP. This was my situation with my dad and his wife and her daughter. My dad's wife had made it so bad that 15 years later I have no relationship with him. I couldn't even make a sandwich without having to give it to my stepsister. Run, kid.
Story time about how I faked being pregnant for 6 months. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm in my late 20s and I have a really successful career. I make plenty of money, I own my own house, and I have 2 cars. But I've always failed in relationships. I had a long-term relationship in my early 20s, but I broke up with him because he just wasn't pulling his weight. I paid for our extravagant lifestyle. He would basically help me with my work and then expect me to pay him. Also, I paid the rent, I paid for the cars, and I paid for every single dinner date we ever had. We also had a joint bank account, which was a huge mistake on my part, because ultimately I was the one earning all the money. After 4 years of dating, I decided to break up with him and I told him to move out of my house. I felt free and I started dating right away. I met this guy one night and he was amazing. He complimented me all the time and made me feel really good about myself. But here's the problem, I tend to fall in love really easily. After that night, that guy and I would talk every single day. He would come over to my place and we would have dinner, but the good thing about this guy was that he had his own money and he was pretty wealthy. His family was also really well off. I totally saw myself marrying this guy, but then eventually we broke up. I found out that he was cheating on me, but also he was doing some illegal stuff in the background. I decided to forgive him for the cheating and everything, but he still wanted to break up. I mean, I was totally shocked because I was forgiving him, but he had no intention of being in a committed relationship with me. So once again, I was single. I decided not to focus on guys at all. Instead, I started going out with my friends and focusing on my career. But you know how it goes. When you're not looking for love, it just knocks on your door, which it kind of literally happened like that. I had some friends come over and they decided to bring some other people that I didn't know. There was one guy that showed up and I knew of him because he was friends with my other friends. He was really cute and we hit it off right away. He asked me out on a date, but I kept saying no because I just didn't want to get into anything. But he really won me over with his personality and I ended up saying yes. And after our first date, I literally thought I was falling in love with him. Like, here I go again. This time I knew that if I got into a relationship with this guy, he had to marry me. So early on in the relationship, I told him that my intention was to marry him, and if his intention wasn't to marry me, then we needed to stop dating. He promised me up and down that he did want to marry me, so I stayed in the relationship. I knew that I wanted him to move in right away, which I know sounds crazy, but I was kind of desperate at this point. My goal in life was to have kids, and I just wasn't getting there. It took me about a week to convince him to move in, and he finally said yes. But he basically told me that he wanted to continue living his life the way he had been before. In other words, he wanted to continue hanging out with his friends whenever he wanted, and I said fine. I was just happy he was committing to something. Then I realized I had to get pregnant in order to tie him down. Part 2 of how I faked a pregnancy for 6 months in order to keep my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After I finally convinced him to move in, I knew that I needed to get pregnant as soon as possible. My goal in life is to be a mom, and because I had so many failed relationships, I knew that I needed to make this one work. The first 2 months of living with my boyfriend were really good, but of course I quickly wanted to get pregnant. I also knew that the only way he would marry me was if I got pregnant, so I got to work. I stopped taking the pill and I didn't tell him, which I know sounds terrible, but here's the problem, I was not getting pregnant. I was off the pill for 3 weeks and nothing happened. I got so desperate, I went to the mall and got a pregnant woman to pee on a stick, which of course came out with a positive result. I went home that night and showed my boyfriend the stick and he was so surprised. He asked me if I was taking the pill, which I said yes, but he got really upset and told me that I probably got pregnant on purpose, which I denied. But then he said the magical words. He said, "I guess we have to get married now." I was so beyond happy, but the problem was that I really wasn't pregnant. So I started gaining weight like crazy. Anytime he left the house, I would eat tons of junk food. I would go late at night to the supermarket and buy tons of junk food. I get Doritos, chips, cookies, and cake and ice cream. I basically ate anything that was sugary. 2 months later, I had gained about 30 pounds, and it looked like I was really pregnant. But my relationship started to fall apart. My boyfriend was upset all the time, blaming me for having gotten pregnant. 6 months into my fake pregnancy, he decided to break up with me. I begged him, but he said he didn't want to be with me and that he needed to be free. That's when I dropped the whole charade and told him I wasn't pregnant. He literally blew up in my face. He actually grabbed a chair and threw it into the TV. He grabbed his stuff and ran away. Of course, he blocked me from everything, so I couldn't contact him. 3 days later, 2 of my cars had been stolen from my driveway, and part of me knew that it was him. But a week after that, he actually reached out and asked me if I wanted to try at the relationship again. But here's the thing, he doesn't have much money, so he can't live the lifestyle I was giving him. I'm pretty sure he only wants to come back because of the money, but I kind of still love him. What should I do?
Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my stepsister that we're not friends and putting my mom in a catch-22? My 17 female mom moved her fiancé in last year. Not really a fan of the guy, but my dad lives overseas, and my mom cried and kicked up a fuss when I floated the idea of going to live with him. So she promised that if I stayed, my stepdad would have no say over me, and I just had to be polite. Fair. He has 2 daughters, May 17 female and June 15 female. June is fine, we vibe. May is in my grade at school, and the best way to describe her is you'd grown a little if you were told to do a group project with her. She's awkward, not very good in school, and really sensitive about everything. She doesn't have any friends that I know of. So when our parents started talking marriage, May latched onto me like a freaking lamprey, and I can't seem to get her off my back. Before they moved in, I could mostly avoid her at school. She's in lower level classes than me. She kept trying to add and message me on SM, and I just didn't respond. Now that they've moved in, she's just always there, trying to be involved with everything I do, talking my ear off and getting in the way. I train a lot every day for my sports, and since she's not in a very good shape, the parents suggested she go to the gym with me since she expressed an interest. She pestered me the whole time about how to use the equipment and was totally worn out and ready to go when I was only a fourth the way done. I finally had it last weekend when I had a friend over after training to game for a bit, and May invited herself into my room with us without asking. I told her we didn't invite her to hang out and to leave, that she was being rude. She started crying and complained to her dad, who came in and told us to let her play. I reminded him that he can't tell me to do anything for my mom, and to take it up with her, which pissed him off. Later, we all had heavy talk and he said I was bullying May, but I told him that May is the one who inserts herself where she's not invited nor wanted. She's not my friend and she's not going to be, so I'd rather she butt out for the few months left until I leave home. My mom is upset because she's in the middle, and stepdad is making noises about breaking up if she doesn't discipline me. I've told her if she caves, I'm not coming back here while he lives here once I'm out. May has been being a drama queen and crying about it to the point that even June told her to shut up. My mom says May is just sensitive and lonely, but I don't see how that's my problem to fix. Not stay home. None of these problems are yours to fix. The fiancé father threatening to break up is between your mom and him. If he is this upset that he can't boss you around, that should be a red flag to your mom. How he treats you is what you need to be concerned about, and he overstepped a boundary here. You did right by you to point that out. Could you be more friendly to May? Yes. But you don't find her interesting and she's inserting herself into your life. She's desperate, clearly. And yes, her problems stem from the parenting she received, so she is just coping as best she can. As someone who has shaken the weird girls off of me in school, I've grown up to regret it. I was harsh for superficial reasons. They didn't fit into social hierarchies in school and I didn't want to taint my image with my peers by hanging out with the social rejects. And I watched these girls shut themselves off from the world entirely after it became clear I didn't want to be their friend. Ultimately, it is not my fault nor responsibility, but I do wish I could go back in time and act a little differently, more compassionately for their sake. You don't owe it to her to be her best friend, but you do owe it to her to treat her with dignity. Just don't do or say anything you might regret. As someone who has shaken the weird girls off of me in school, I've grown up to regret it. I was harsh for superficial reasons. Flip side is both someone who was a weird girl and also befriended a lot of weird girls and guys. Even when I didn't jive with them, I regretted it. It takes a lot of energy to essentially teach someone how to be around other people. And no matter what you do, you end up looking like a bully when you eventually need to establish boundaries. People encourage you to befriend and help them get along more with others, but will turn around and accuse you of being toxic or trying to kill their individuality the moment you suggest certain behaviors, or a detriment to making friends. This girl is already boundary stomping when OP is making it clear they're not friends, and that she doesn't want to be around her. It would be even worse if she tried to pretend they got along. Better to establish the need for space right off the bat and clearly, so that there was a chance of civility, rather than OP never getting a chance to breathe again without there being waterworks.
Story time about how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm now 24, but 10 years ago, a new girl moved into our town. Her and I quickly became best friends in school. She would always come over to my house and have dinner with me and my parents. My parents really grew to love her because she was so polite and really cared about me. The only thing was that she never wanted me to go over to her house. At first I thought it might be because she was embarrassed of her house or something, and eventually I asked her and she told me that her dad was abusive towards her mom, and that was the reason why she didn't want me to come over. I felt terrible that she had to live like that, so I expressed to my mom that I was really concerned about her. So my mom actually asked my best friend if she wanted to come live with us for a little bit. Let's call my best friend Sarah. Sarah said no because she wanted to be with her mom. But my mom really wanted to help Sarah and her mom. My mom was in an abusive relationship herself when she was younger, so she understood what Sarah and her mom were going through. My mom decided to invite Sarah's mom over for dinner. That's when my mom asked her about their living situation, and Sarah's mom confessed that it was pretty bad. My mom suggested that she should try to get a divorce, and a few weeks later, she filed for divorce. We were all so happy because this meant things would get better for Sarah and her mom. And things did get better. Her dad moved out to his own apartment, and a few weeks later, he had a new girlfriend. I was able to stay over at Sarah's house, and it was really fun. One of the times that I was with Sarah at her house, her dad showed up. But he started making me feel really uncomfortable. He told Sarah that I was the prettiest friend she'd ever had. I could see him staring at me. After he left, Sarah apologized. I went home and tried not to think about it. A few days later, I was walking home when Sarah's dad pulled up next to me. Part 2 is up. 2 of how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. One day that I was at Sarah's house, I decided to walk home instead of calling my mom to pick me up. As I was walking home, Sarah's dad pulls up next to me. At this point, I still hadn't forgotten what he had said about me, and I still felt really uncomfortable. He asked me if I needed a ride, and I politely said no. Then he started to laugh and asked me if I was scared of him. Of course I said no, but the truth is that I was. And he said, well, then get in the car if you're not scared of me. And I did. As we got closer to my house, he put his hand on my lap. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I pushed his hand away. Then he asked me why I was being so rude. I told him that he made me feel uncomfortable, that I just wanted to get out of the car and walk the rest of the way home. He said no because it would be dangerous for me to be by myself walking at night. He put his hand back on my lap and told me that I was really sturdy. That's when he grabbed my hand and tried to put it on his lap. Of course, I pulled my hand away really quick. Then he pulled over really fast and tried to kiss me. I was so beyond disgusted. I just started yelling, and this really took him by surprise because he must have thought that I was just gonna let him. While I was yelling at the top of my lungs, I managed to unlock the car and open the door. I basically threw myself on the ground, and he started yelling at me, telling me to shut up. He tried to pull me back into the car, but at this point I was laying on the ground, so he had to pick up dead weight. He grabbed my foot and started pulling me back towards the car, but I started kicking him. He told me that I was overreacting and that he was just trying to be friendly. Luckily, a few of the neighbors heard me screaming because I was right in front of their house. They came outside and ran towards me because they saw me struggling with him. That's when the woman said that she was going to call the cops. He tried to tell the lady that I was overreacting and that he had only leaned over to put the seatbelt on, but I took it the wrong way. I told her that he tried to kiss me and she started calling the cops. That's when he drove away. I literally could not believe what had just happened. Finally, the cops arrived and so did my mom. I told them everything that happened, and I even told them that he had made a comment about me in Sarah's house a few days before that. They quickly started looking for his car and found him at a parking lot. They arrested him and he spent 2 nights in jail. His girlfriend then went to bail him out. She told the cops that he was with her and that I was just lying and that I made everything up. She even went as far as to tell the police that I had been hitting on him and that she had been a witness to it. She would even call my house at 2 in the morning and hang up. I even saw her car near my house and by my school, which means she was following me. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my best friend's dad tried to assault me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I called the police to tell him that his girlfriend was following me. That's when the cops said that I could probably get a restraining order against him and his girlfriend. Sarah and her mom came over to our house after they heard what happened. Of course, they felt really bad, but they weren't surprised. Sarah told me that that's why she never wanted me to come over because her dad had commented things about her friends before. Worst of all is that they couldn't keep him in jail for what he did to me, but a few months later he was finally put into prison because of something else he did. Apparently he had tried to steal a car or something. Remember the crazy girlfriend I told you Sarah's dad had? She kept following me for a long time. She would even show up to my school asking me if I wanted a ride home. Eventually I was able to get a restraining order against her, but she was really scary. A few years ago she tried to follow me on Instagram. I had to block and report her. I mean, what kind of woman would fight for a man like that? The good news is Sarah and I are still good friends to this day. We even went to college together and now have steady boyfriends. Even Sarah's mom remarried and she's really happy with her husband. I look back at what happened as a learning experience, but to be honest, if he ever gets out of prison, I'm scared. Story time about how I'm in love with my sister's boyfriend and I think he likes me too. Actually, no, I know so because he kissed me 3 days ago. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. The story I'm about to tell you guys is pretty bad, so please don't come at me in the comments. I swear I'm a good girl. A little backstory, my sister and I have never really gotten along. She's 3 years older than me and thinks she's the queen of the house. And she's always seen me as competition, which I hate. My mom would always try to make us get along, but it was totally impossible. My sister was always upset at something I did. Eventually, I stopped trying with my sister and I wouldn't make any effort to make her like me. Finally, last year she moved out and I was so happy. We celebrated my 20th birthday at home last year, and of course my sister came over. But she brought this really cute boy with her. Let me tell you guys, it was instant love at first sight. I can't even explain what I felt, I just knew that I liked him. Even my mom made a comment about how good looking he was. And can I just say that I caught him staring at me a few times throughout the dinner. After that, I never really saw him because my sister and I never hung out. Until my sister lost her job because of COVID and had to move back in with us. And this meant that I was seeing her boyfriend a lot more around our house. He was so nice to me. Anytime they wanted to watch a movie, he would always invite me. If they were going to go out to eat or go to the beach, he would always invite me. Eventually, I started saying yes, well, because I liked him. And something told me that he liked me too. And yes, I know it's totally wrong, but I just couldn't help myself. Whenever I knew he was going to come over, I would dress up and look really cute. I also had a pool in the backyard, so I would make sure I was in a bikini whenever he came over. I know this sounds bad, but it's going to get worse. Well, guess what? Around this time, my sister actually got COVID. Thankfully, she didn't get really sick, but she was a little bit under the weather. And of course, she had to quarantine. So she basically stayed in her room and we all were on the other side of the house. Of course, her boyfriend, let's call him Mark, would come over and bring her food sometimes. On one of these occasions, he asked me if I wanted to go to the beach with him and his friends the following day. He knew that I was totally bored because of quarantine, so I said yes. And guess what? He didn't tell my sister that he asked me and I didn't tell her that I said yes. So it was our little secret. The following day, I wore my sexiest bikini and we had a great time at the beach with his friends. While we were at the beach with his friends, I could tell that he kept staring at me. And he caught me staring at him too a couple of times. When we drove back to our house, he made a comment about how good I looked in the bikini. That's when I told him that he looked really good too. From then on, we started flirting all the time, making little comments, staring at each other, and he also started following me on Instagram. So I got to work posting sexy stories all the time, and it totally worked because he would reply to them. That's when I sent him a naughty picture. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I'm in love with my sister's boyfriend and he likes me too because he kissed me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So after flirting back and forth through DM, I finally sent him a cute naughty picture. I mean, not so naughty, but a little naughty. And that's when he sent me one back. Then he sent me a text message saying that he wished he had met me before he met my sister. And I told him I felt the exact same way. The following day, he came to visit my sister like he usually did. My sister had COVID at the time, so he would come every single day. At this point, my sister's quarantine was almost over. So I knew I either had to act fast or talk to him and tell him that we couldn't take things further. My parents had decided to go to our lake house, so I knew I had the house all to myself. And my sister couldn't come out of her room, so he and I were basically alone in the house. That's when he asked me if we could talk. We went to the backyard so that my sister wouldn't hear us, and he confessed that he really liked me, but he didn't know how to feel about it. He also told me he felt really guilty, and I totally understood him. He asked me what I thought we should do, and I just didn't have an answer. We just stared at each other for a second, and then he kissed me. And it was the most magical kiss of my entire life. We then proceeded to make out for about 10 minutes. After that, he told me we needed to make a decision. I told him the best thing for us to do was to just be honest with my sister. We went straight to my sister's room and told her everything. Of course, my sister being the drama queen that she is, she started throwing things around in her room, and she called my parents and told them everything. Mark got on the phone with my parents and told them that he was responsible for everything, but that he couldn't lie to my sister and that he had to be honest. And yeah, I felt even harder when he said that. That's when my sister had the bright idea to lie and say that she was pregnant and that he had to get married with her. Mark hesitated but said if that was true, then yes, they would get married. I told my sister I didn't believe her and that she needed to provide a pregnancy test. Mark went and got the pregnancy test, and of course, it came back negative. Mark went home and I got on the phone with my parents, and I told him that I would step aside for my sister's happiness. My parents told me that they thought it was the best thing. So I called Mark and told him that he needed to stay with my sister. Now my sister is trash-talking me to all her friends, which I expected and I guess I deserve. But should I sacrifice my happiness and his? My sister won't let Mark and I talk at all. When he comes over, I completely ignore him. What should I do, you guys?
Next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for asking my in-laws to choose between me and a daughter they never had? I, 30 female, have been married to my husband, 38 male, for 9 years, and I have a long history of conflict with a woman named Sally, who used to be my husband's best friend. The trouble started right after my husband and I started dating. He had a best friend, let's call her Sally, who he now realizes he had an inappropriate relationship with. I got hateful messages after we started dating about how I stole him from her and how toxic I was. The next conflict was a couple of years later. She separated from her husband and turned to my husband for comfort. In the end, I found out after we moved back to the area, she was lying to us about everything she said happened that ended her marriage, and I confronted her saying I didn't appreciate being lied to. Sally started telling people that I was in love with her ex-husband, and that is why I took his side with everything. That was the final straw for me. I went to mother-in-law and put down a boundary that I wanted no contact with Sally. Eventually, after about a year of minimal contact had passed, my mother-in-law started pressuring me to let things go and start attending family functions again when Sally was going to be there. I told my mother-in-law that I would be willing to attend events where Sally was likely to be, but I would not socialize with Sally. As soon as that happened, I can only assume my mother-in-law told Sally about the change, because she started reaching out to my husband saying I miss our friendship that we used to have. Recently, I received an anonymous email saying some really harsh things. I assumed this was some random person trolling me, but we looked up the IP address and it came from the area Sally lives. The email referenced my private Facebook group, my first and middle name, and was from her area. She is the only person who I have ever had this kind of a hateful situation with, so I can only assume it was from her. I decided to have a conversation with my mother-in-law and father-in-law about going zero contact with Sally, not even accidental contact, and it went terribly. It ended up with us basically telling my in-laws that they needed to decide who they wanted at a family function and tell the other party that they could not come. My mother-in-law insisted again that she wished my husband could just be friends with Sally again even if I wanted to stay away from her, and that it would fix all the problems that has been happening. I reminded her again about all the things Sally had said to me, and my mother-in-law said she still didn't believe it was true, and kept saying Sally's like a daughter to us. She's family, and she would never do those things. My father-in-law refuses to even participate in these conversations. He just gets up and walks away because he refuses to hear a bad word about Sally. I am left wondering, am I the a-hole here? Now for the comments. Not the a-hole. Time for some hard boundaries with your in-laws. Info. Where is your husband in all of this? He likes to avoid conflict, so for a long time he was staying out of it. But ever since she tried to start a rumor about me being in love with her ex-husband, he is done with her. I had to cut that out to make the post short enough. From what I understand is that Sally's connection to the family is your husband, and since he doesn't want any type of relationship with her, why is she still invited to any family function? It would be a different situation if the mother-in-law invites her one-on-one, but why keep inviting her to family events and make her own son and his wife uncomfortable? Her parents are my in-laws' best friends, and she grew up being close to their family. I grew up close to the family too, but because of our age difference, it wasn't as close as Sally's since she was besties with my husband for so long. She calls them her second parents, and they say she's like their daughter. Sounds like you're up against not just one relationship, but 3. Safe to assume that your in-laws fear that if they set a single boundary with Sally, they'll risk losing her and her parents / their best friends. People they've known a lot longer than they've known you. You're right to die on this hill, but understand what you're asking of them and temper your expectations accordingly. This may result in them sacrificing both you and your husband to keep the peace with Sally's family. That's a good point. I don't want to have considered. Thank you for commenting. It helps me look at things from all angles. Last story. Am I the a-hole for defending my grandmother's decision to put me in her will and life insurance as main beneficiary? I, 30 female, have always been really close to my grandma. Even when my aunts and cousins lived with her, we would spend time together, just the 2 of us. Originally, it was because my own mother, her daughter, was very neglectful of me. But as I got older, we both realized we had a lot in common. I got emancipated at 16, and my grandma was my biggest supporter. As soon as I was able to, I returned the favor and helped her out with whatever she needed. Grocery shopping, yard work, deep cleaning her house. She has very poor eyesight, so can't drive. And after my grandpa died, she needed help. None of my family, aunt, her kids, uncle and his kids, mom and my younger sibling, stepped up. My grandma recently got into an accident. She needed surgery and almost died. Now that she's home and doing better, albeit needs more help than before, she decided to update her will. Originally, the will had half of her money and assets being split between her 3 children, and other half split between me, my sibling, and my 4 cousins. She changed it to me and my children receiving about 80%, and the rest of the family splitting the remaining 20%. Obviously, my family's pissed. My mom and me just recently started repairing our relationship, and now she's refusing to talk to me. My aunt calls me daily and accuses me of manipulating a frail old woman, and even went as far as making a report to Adult Protective Services, saying I'm stealing. I defend myself, saying Grandma changed her will and life insurance while of sound mind, and that is her choice. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I wanted to add, I recently got a settlement of child support from my bio father, and my family thinks that I stole that money from my mother. And both this situation and that one proves that I'm manipulating my family for money. I got the child support instead of my mother because I was neglected, and then in and out of foster care before getting emancipated. Grandma was the only person who advocated for me, but couldn't take me in as a child because of her health. Not stay home. It's clear why she has changed her will. These people are just entitled and greedy. Agreed, not stay home. Maybe your grandma could talk to a lawyer and write something about why she chose to leave that amount to you. Not stay home. The child support was always going to be for you being the child in question. Your grandmother will do what she wants. They might contest the will later, but there's nothing you can do about that. I wouldn't argue with them or engage in any kind of discussion with them over this. Talking with them about it at this point can only work against you. Not stay home. She's an adult of sound mind, like you say. You've also worked hard on helping her, and it sounds like you've done that for years. Your mother wants a big payout without doing any of the help. Your grandma isn't letting her get away with that. You haven't done anything wrong, so you're not stay home. My grandma was going to cut my mom out completely, but feels guilty because she feels responsible for how my mom turned out since she raised her. Leaving a small amount for the rest of the family is a smart move. If she left nothing, they could contest it. Enjoy your time with your grandma and cut everything else off. They sound abusive and toxic.
Am I the asshole for wanting my mom to be in the delivery room when my wife has our baby? My wife, Alice, 28 female, is 7 months pregnant. She's starting to think about who she'd like to have in the delivery room when the time comes. She said she would really like her dad there for support. Alice is really close with her dad since she was a kid and has only grown closer to him since her mom died, so that was no surprise. I'm completely fine with having Doug there. She said she doesn't want her stepmom there, which is fine. Her stepmom is really sweet, has been so helpful through the entirety of the pregnancy, and I know she will be hurt when she finds out she can't be there, but I can understand. The issue I have is that Alice doesn't want my mom there. My mom has never been my wife's biggest fan, but she is so excited to have a grandchild and has been planning on being in the delivery room the entire pregnancy and likely before. Like I said, my mom has been hard on Alice and can be a little judgmental, but she's still the grandmother of our child and wants to be there. She's also my mother, and I find it unfair. She can have her dad there, but I can't have my mom there. It's a high-risk pregnancy, and Alice has been really adamant about trying to give birth naturally, but she claims that if things take a turn and she wants an epidural or there needs to be an emergency C-section for whatever reason, she is worried about the judgment from my mom because my mom has openly expressed her distaste for both. Additionally, she says my mom is not the nicest to her. I know my mom has been a little harsh about her weight gain, even though about 30 pounds. She was 120 before. Allegedly, when my wife went over to my parents' house recently, she dropped a plate on the floor, and my mom yelled at her while she made her get down on the floor and clean it up.
Oh my gosh.
I understand where Alice is coming from, and while she'll be the one giving birth, he is my child as much as hers, and I feel like I should be allowed to have my mom there. My wife and I got into a scuffle about this before she started crying, and the issue was dropped. She told me that I was being selfish.
If you can solve this riddle, you're a genius. There was this woman and she was a serial killer. She would take men on dates and then poison them and kill them. One day she goes on a date with you. Ooh, but she can't go through with it because she's so in love with you. Eventually you two end up getting married and you buy a house together. When you buy the house, she claims the basement for her work and she says that you're not allowed to go down there. You say okay and you're happily married. But as time goes on, you get really curious and one day she leaves for work and you decide to go downstairs and see what's down there. When you go downstairs, it's pitch black and you reach around the walls to see if there's a light switch to turn on, but there isn't. As you're feeling around the room, there's a light bulb above you that is unscrewed a little bit. You screw it in a little bit more to turn on the light. Immediately, you see all the dead bodies that she's ever killed, and you're in shock as you're looking around for a while, but then you hear her car pull up in the driveway and she's home from work. You quickly unscrew the light bulb, run upstairs, and sit down. When she gets home, she goes downstairs to check on her dead bodies, and she immediately knew that you were in there. How did she know? Pause this video right now because I'm about to say the answer. It was because the light bulb was still hot.
Wandering bodies, stumbling side by side, sharing a bottle of it so all night. And it's the last loop and the bus has gone, so now our only chance is wandering on. I've got you, hey, and you got me, so let's see, hey, where freedom leads, and we'll still hear the birds out singing while both our ears are ringing.
Am I the a-hole for telling my mom to go back to the family she replaced me with? My mom, 42, and I, 22 male, used to be really close. Like she's all I've ever had. And she's the one who taught me to be as strong as I am today. And her becoming a cop inspired my whole life. I love her so much. And I admire how strong she is. And I wish things were like how they were. Her uncle, my great-uncle, managed to bring her to Canada from Kosovo in 1999. If that helps give you guys an idea of the kind of things that she's been through. When I went to university, our relationship started changing. She disliked my girlfriends, my uni choice, wanted me to ferry home every weekend, and then I got a co-op term at a prestigious company in Vancouver. Don't ask, I'm not giving it up. That she did not want me to work for because she had a moral stance against it. I agree with her, but it was a great opportunity. I'm going to graduate at the end of the term, but I'm set for a job within the Vancouver Police Department because of it. But my mom cut me off because of it and straight up told me not to come back. So I had to move in with my great uncle and a son, my uncle. We started messaging again half a year ago after she sent me a chain message on WhatsApp, but we've been taking it slow. I follow my mom on Instagram, but she rarely posts, and when she does, it's anti-war stuff. But then she put up this post with a caption something like, "So happy to have a real family again, can't wait to go on my new journey." And it showed her boyfriend and her with engagement rings and an ultrasound. Like, I don't know, it just triggered something inside of me. Am I not her real family? Were we nothing? It just made me very angry. Like I'm going to have the sibling and stepfather I always wanted, and she couldn't even be bothered to tell me personally? Well, I decided to wait and see how long it would take her to call me about the news. And she just didn't. Reading break was 2 weeks ago, and at the end of it, my mom came to my great-uncle's house to pick something up. She saw me and tried acting like no time had passed, and how excited she was for my graduation and this and that. She still didn't acknowledge she's getting married. I just told her not to care about my graduation and to go back to the family she replaced me with. Left and stayed gone till she went home. My uncle told me that what I did made her cry and I was an a-hole to her. And my great-uncle told me that I should have handled things with more tact. I feel bad about it because she was reaching out to me, and everything's been frosty with my uncle since then. Now for the comments. Not an a-hole. She wrote the post that insinuated she didn't have a real family, so now the post bit her in the bum. And she kicked him out. Will she do the same to her real family if they disagree with her? To be honest, probably it's like cheaters and narcissists. They don't change. They just find you victims to fool. Not the a-hole OP. It really does seem like she no longer considers you as a family, and you just pointed that out. You have every right to feel bitter. Also consider showing your uncles the post she made. That may help them understand why you acted the way you did. Info, did you show your uncles the IG post? Ask them what were you supposed to think when she wrote, "So happy to have a real family again, can't wait to go on my new journey," and it showed her boyfriend and her with engagement rings and an ultrasound. And she shows up acting like she didn't cut you off for where you work, and nothing ever happened? No, not an a-hole. Edit. In my opinion, if she wants to reconcile, she needs to sit down with you one-on-one and explain why she did what she did. Because there's a good chance she may dump you again, especially if you do something else against her high moral standards, or if her boyfriend doesn't like you, or if she just doesn't have time anymore. Put some consistent effort into this relationship, mom, if you want one. My guess is she wanted him to grow up to be a mama's boy, forever tied to her. Instead, he became an independent adult. Not a home. She's your mother. The least she could have done was to pick up the phone and tell you about the wedding and a baby. She could cut you off for getting a job. Then she acts like nothing's happening and doesn't even bother telling you she's getting married, after cutting you off and kicking you out for a job. She hurt you and now you have to suck it up? She can suck up a little. Great uncle seems to understand better than your uncle, since he said you should have been more tactful, not that you shouldn't have said it at all. Not stay home. She needs to understand that the lack of relationship now is her fault, not yours. Next story. Am I the a-hole for losing it on my fiancé for disinviting my stepsisters from our wedding? I'm gonna keep it short. I, female 25, am getting married to my fiancé next month. We've had no issues with the wedding planning except the guest list. Context. I have a large family. I have 2 stepsisters, 18-20, and a biological brother, 27, and also a biological sister, 30. My fiancé argued that the guest list should be cut short and suggested I only invite my immediate family. I asked him to elaborate, and he suggested excluding my stepsisters. I said no and got upset with him for implying that they're not family. He said, well, this wasn't what I meant. I was just speaking from a technical angle, especially since I didn't include them in the wedding party like maid of honor and bridesmaids, so he thought they were unneeded. But I said they were wanted, and will always be wanted and included by me. Well, days ago, my stepsisters called saying my fiancé canceled their invitations and told them some lie about changing wedding location and telling them they won't be able to come. I was fuming. I went home and started screaming at him. He asked that I hear him out, then explained he had no choice since we were required to shorten the list. And he just did my dirty work for me since I obviously was looking at the situation from an emotional angle and couldn't bring myself to disinvite my stepsisters myself. I called him a hypocrite because he invited almost 6 of his friends, who, as far as I know, aren't immediate family. I told him he hurt my stepsisters by going behind my back and excluding them from my wedding, which they've been so excited about. He got up from the couch and yelled that it's our wedding, so my stepsister's feelings aren't really that relevant compared to his, and called me controlling for wanting my way or the highway. He took his phone and stormed out to see his friends. Some of his friends called to scold me for how I'm treating their brother, and then went on about how rude it was to suggest that their brother disinvite them from the wedding just because I don't like them, and called it a you problem. My future mother-in-law called and is wanting to speak to me. He probably told her what's going on, and she is probably going to ask that I apologize for yelling. Please don't marry him, OP. Not to jump on the bandwagon here, but please don't marry him, OP. I am jumping on the bandwagon. Please don't marry him, OP. Not stay home. It sounds like he's the issue here for implying that those you consider to be your immediate family are unneeded. He also then canceled their invitations without asking you how you felt about that, even though you made your stance perfectly clear. Has he cut off any of his immediate relatives, or has he simply decided yours are more expendable? He then called you controlling when he went behind your back to uninvite your immediate family? He sounds like a nightmare. Then his friends started scolding you. That's a lot of red flags. Do any of them have any respect for you? And now he's trying to get his mom to ring you to put additional pressure on. There are so many issues here. Do not apologize to any of them. He removed your immediate family without considering your feelings, and is wholly in the wrong for that. But the only way you could be an a-hole is if you marry this guy. Give yourself a better future. Run. Some people worry about starting over, but marrying the wrong person will actually delay your life more. Think OP. The divorce process takes a long time. I hate when Redditors jump to encourage one moving on from their spouse, but I have to agree in this case. Not stay whole, OP, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not stay whole. Wow. Just wow. Girl, run. Do not marry this man. He doesn't even grasp the basics of family. Is this the kind of father you want for your kids? And his friends calling to berate you? The friends he surrounded himself with also don't seem to understand family. How dare he include them? How dare he ask them to call you? How dare they think they have any authority to tell you who gets to witness your commitment to another human being? This is your family, but he's not getting that. Uninviting your stepsisters behind your back is not only immature, he seems to have no ability to confront conflict. Inappropriate. He kept you out of a decision. Passive-aggressive red flags everywhere. And frankly, sinister. This is an important milestone in a person's life. An event so steeped in emotion that the memory will be seared into your brain. And the fact he can't understand you'd want to share it with your full family and have that memory of them witnessing and supporting your happiness is deeply concerning behavior. Don't expect your marriage to be any different. He just showed you who he really is, and he doesn't even see part of your family as family. I'm so sorry. It will be messy to cancel, but don't let that stop you. Next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for going on an expensive vacation and not helping fund my sister's IVF? My 30 male sister, 34 female, has been struggling to conceive with her husband for a few years now. They recently went to a gyno and were told they likely would be unable to without IVF. Obviously, she's upset about it. I don't know their exact financial situation, but she and her husband are both teachers at private schools. But they said their insurance doesn't cover it at all and that they were told it would likely be about $25,000, all in with the medication and everything. There was no guarantee of success and it could be $25,000 and no positive result. They asked me and my parents if we could help pitch in, and my parents objected due to it being against their religious beliefs. I'm not religious at all and don't have any ethical objections, but that's just a lot of money with no guarantee. So it seems like a bad idea, and I'm just not comfortable with giving that amount to a family member. My wife and I work hard and we don't want to potentially throw money away if it didn't succeed. So we told them no. She was upset, but left it at that at a time when we told her. Well, my wife and I have always wanted to go to Europe. And now that travel is back on, we decided to take a trip together. I don't use social media, but my wife does, and she got excited and posted on her story confirmation of our flights being booked. Well, my sister saw that, and then texted me saying how I was an a-hole for spending all this money on a vacation, but not helping my own sister have a family. At first, I brushed it off as her just being upset at her situation. But then today, I got another mean text from her. Am I the a-hole here? Not the a-hole. It's not your job to fund her dreams. It's really bizarre to me that that's not just the sister's first reaction, but that she doubled down on it. Yikes. Like, I already feel uncomfortable involving anyone other than my husband with the process of baby making, even just in the context of conversing about it. Hi, oversharing in-laws. I can't imagine feeling so entitled and freaking begrudge a family member their well-earned vacation, because I thought I deserved the money that they earned more. So many WTFs here. Not stay home. If they think IVF is expensive, do they have any idea how much parenting costs? You can, however, ask them to consider medical tourism. Plenty of countries where they can get quality treatment for a fraction of the cost, plus holiday. I agree that OP is not the a-hole, but I disagree with your argument. IVF is a huge one-time upfront cost. Raising children is expensive, but those expenses are spread out over time. I don't think it's fair to say if a couple can't afford IVF, they can't afford children, or shouldn't have children. Not stay home. Having been through IVF myself, I feel for your sister. She thinks you can help her and are choosing not to, and that must hurt her. That said, your money is your money. She asked for help and you declined. What you do with your money isn't her business. So confronting you more than once already about your trip makes her the a-hole. Not stay home. It is not your responsibility to pay for this. As someone who is currently going through IVF though, I do encourage you to read up on it and provide all of the emotional support you possibly can. It is a hellish experience, and she is going to need all the kindness you can possibly give. Also, if their insurance isn't going to cover it, it's likely going to cost way more than $25,000. Probably more like $40,000+. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for not helping my partner with our newborn? I know the title sounds bad, but I'm finding myself in a very difficult situation and I'm genuinely not sure if I'm in the wrong here. I'm 27 male, I'm a surgical resident. My partner, 27 female, was a teacher but is currently a stay-at-home mother to our newborn child. We met in college and have been together for just over 7 years now. Last year, she took a pregnancy test after missing her period and found out she was pregnant. We were both happy, but also concerned about taking care of a child. My main concern when we found out was that I could not help out with a child because I work 80 to 100 hours a week. However, we both love each other and did want a family. So in the end, we decided to keep the child, and that she would take time off of work while I was completing my residency and take care of the kid. I would complete my residency, and then after having somewhat more humane hours, would obviously split child caring duties equally with her so that she can also return to work. It's been 3 months since our kid was born now, and things have been rough to say the least. I'm still working nearly 100 hours a week and I'm constantly at the brink of exhaustion. If anything, my workload has increased since then, as I'm now learning how to perform larger operations. My sleep is almost non-existent, but I'm constantly under intense pressure due to my work environment. Things have obviously been rough for her too. The pregnancy and delivery were without complication, but it goes without saying that it was still hugely taxing on her mentally and physically. Recently, my partner has been asking me to take care of our kid when I get home. Initially, I helped her without hesitation, feeling like it was within my capacity and wanting to support her. But in the past few weeks, she's been asking more and more of me. And a few days ago, she demanded I take care of our kid immediately as I walked into the door. I hadn't even had time to take off my shoes yet, and when I said just give me a second, she told me to hurry the heck up. I later learned that she had an incredibly rough day and was just at capacity. But in a moment, I was so caught off guard I yelled at her to back off. I was too exhausted to deal with it then, so I locked myself in the bathroom to take a long shower and calm down. We later talked about what had happened and apologized to each other, but during it, she essentially told me that she felt like I wasn't doing enough to take care of the kid, and that it was our responsibility equally. I told her that I felt like I was already doing more than we agreed on, and that I can literally not do any more than what I'm currently doing. After talking and arguing about this for about 2 hours, we still couldn't come to an agreement and decided to leave the topic for now. So, am I the a-hole for not wanting to take on a larger parenting role during residency? Friends I've talked to seem split on the matter. No a-holes here. This is a case of two people drowning and arguing over who has their head up out of the water a few inches more than the other. You have a newborn, are working 100 hours a week, and a wife who is most likely so overwhelmed she can't see straight. Both of you are sleep deprived and not in your right mind. What you need is help. I don't care who said they would do what's before the baby came. It's here now and it's not what either of you expected. It's time to start from scratch and use your limited energy to find solutions to give you both reprieve. This right here. No one in this situation is the a-hole. They're just both exhausted, doing very taxing and demanding jobs/tasks and need help. I know Opie said they can't afford help right now, but they both need to figure out something before this tears them apart. No a-holes here. You're both exhausted and pushed to your limits. Snaps like this are going to happen. As long as you apologize afterwards and try to see things from the other point of view and remember you love each other, you'll be fine. Things will get better, but you have to tough it out. Can you hire help? Get family or friends to help out a little. When I was a baby, my mom's best friend took care of me a day or two a week, and she's still considered my aunt to this day. Don't know what your support system is, but you seem to need to leverage it a little more.